So today's DIY project will be going from this to this. So I'm basically building some huts upstairs. Now I don't have my decking screwed down yet, but I'm going to show you how to build the foundation of it, build the stairs, do the front planks, and there will be some places inside of here that you'll need to support for some steps. So like on the end over here, once I got it all framed up, once I cut my decking, my edge over here is about 1/16 of an inch. So I'm going to take a reinforcement and screw it into here, so I've got something to nail my step to. So it's not perfect. I'm not a carpenter by trade, never claimed to be, so anyone out there, please don't slam me if you're a professional and I did something wrong. But this is basically just so you have an idea. If you're a DIY handyman, can kind of do some of this yourself. So the one thing I'm going to do, I'm going to change on the drawings. When I put the drawings on here, I'll give you a link to the drawings where you can get them from. I'll also do a couple screenshots, so you can just screenshot it if you don't want to go to a website and look them up. As you can see down here on this corner, my 45 at the end is not perfect. I'm a 1/2 inch short on these boards here. So instead of doing what I should have done and putting it together first and then measuring it, I tried to cut the boards without having the base done. Didn't work out too good for me, so I ended up, instead of recutting all my long boards, just cutting my corners again and reshaping this edge. So I'm going to give you the exact dimensions of what I've got here, with a 1/2 inch added to this. Again, this is just to give you a reference. Make sure you measure before you cut, that way you can save some lumber. So since I'm doing this by myself, I've got my board clamped to my table. I clamped my 45 onto the board. I've allowed enough space for my saw. When I cut, if I can get the camera in there right, I can use my my square to actually keep my line straight. Since I'm using a skill saw to cut this instead of a chop saw, this will keep my line nice and straight when I go across there. So now that I've got that cut, I'm going to go ahead and cut the rest of my boards up. I'll cut my front board first, and I'll show you how I cut these. So the front side of my board is going to get cut at a 22.5 degree angle, so I can make a couple little bevels in there. So I'll have a 22.5, 22.5, which makes a 45, which goes to the back. So to do that, I'm going to take my first board, which is my front. I'm going to cut a 22.5 degree angle into it to start with before I cut the other length of the board. So I've just shaved off the end of the board to a 22.5 inch degree angle. I'm going to flip it over, measure out my 46 inches, and then cut it. So I've taken this cut, turned it inward, face down, measured my 46 inches across here, and I want to make sure I cut back this way so both cuts are going the same direction. So there's my front and back pieces. Again, 22 degree angle cut on the ends here. I'll come down to here, put another 22 on, and that'll make a 45 to go down to here. So next thing I'm going to do is I want to cut these 4 beams right here. So I got 1, 2, 3, 4 that are coming across this way. I'm going to cut those next. Once I get those cut, then I can angle in my sides. Now since I'm making 4 of the same boards, what I'm going to do is take the first board I cut, flush it at the end here. Once I get it flushed at the end, take my pencil mark and mark it. I'm going to use this board as my template for all the boards I'm cutting. That way I end up with 4 boards that are exactly the same size. So with nothing screwed or nailed together, there's my foundation basically. So I'm going to cut my 45s now, or my 22.5 this way, 22.5 this way, so I can finish my corners, and that'll give me my bottom base basically. So I've cut this right hand board at 13.5 inches. My next board I went ahead and cut long, cut my 22 degree angle. I put this board in place where I want it at. And then what I'll do is I'll get my measurement, since I've got this flushed out here at 45, up here I'll mark my line. So I want it to be right there. So that's where I want my cut at. All right, so what I've done, I've measured my first board out 13.5 inches on the outside edge, cut a 22-degree back cut in it. Up here where my front's gonna meet, I've cut this board long. I went ahead and cut my 22.5 degree on this side. I'm gonna take my board here, which I know is gonna be my length, and I'm just gonna make a little pencil mark right here at the edge. And that's where I wanna cut my next 22-degree angle across this way. So it'll be something like that. It won't be exactly like that, but it'll be close to that. Then this will butt into that when I get done. So as you can see, now I've got that measured out. I've got a 90-degree angle there, and it goes right into my board. So I'm going to take these two boards back out. I'm going to mirror them. So I'm going to do the exact same thing for the other side. So after I've got it mirrored, you can see my right side, my left side ready to go together. There's some obvious cracks you can see now, but once I tighten it all up, everything will fit together. So my bottom part is basically laid out. I need to put some supports in for the next deck, because I'm just going to build the same thing on top of this. So I need supports for the decking underneath of it. So the pieces I'm going to cut now are this one going at this angle, this one at this angle, and these two small boards up here. Now to get this measurement, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come from my inside corner here, which is basically a 45-degree angle. I'm going to use my tape measure for a straight line, and then I can get my length that way to my inside board from here. It'll also give me my angle at the end once I get this board done. I'll lay the board in there and I'll just mark the angle on the board. All right, so I got this angle cut here. I won't lie to you, this was a pain in the butt for me. Again, I'm not a carpenter, so figuring out the angles took a while. This is a 22.5, a 22.5, and a 22.5. Now when I get all these boards cut out, I'm going to actually, just before I screw them together, I'm going to measure them all and put dimensions for each board. That way hopefully you can just cut what I put down and match it exactly. So that's all the pieces of my base together. So I'm going to get all the measurements of these, write them all down, and then I'm going to start working on my second layer. So I'm ready to start on my top step now. So what I've done is I've measured from here to here, and I've got 40 inches. So I made sure my left side was even, my right side was even at the bottom and the top. So I'm going to make my back piece first, which is 40 inches wide. That'll go from outside edge to outside edge. That way it's supported completely on both sides. All right, so I measured my side boards. I did 9.5-inch boards. And what I did was I did a half 45 cut here. So basically I took this on my compound miter saw and I cut this back at an angle 45 degrees halfway through the board. Now to figure my front out, I took the 40 inches from the back. The boards are 1.5 inches thick, so I took 3/4 of an inch, 3/4 of an inch, which is 1.5 inches, and then I cut these at a 45-degree angle. So I got 38.5-inch board for my front, cut at 45s. So on the front, I'm gonna have nice, smooth, finished edges. So now I just need to measure from the inside edge to inside edge, cut 2 of those boards out, and then I'll be ready to screw everything together. So I did one more thing. I took 2 more pieces. These were 10 1/8 inches for my middle support. I went ahead and cut 2 more. I'm gonna put this one in between the 2 boards. So basically, I'll be able to support it from the bottom, and then I'll have some way to support this piece and this piece again. And then I'll have something to screw this piece into the side with. That way I'm not having to try to toenail or screw into this little tiny part right here. I'll do that for both sides. So I'm gonna put my outside together first. Once I get the outside done, then I'll do my left beam, right beam as we're looking at it, then my 2 center beams. I'm gonna mark them all out. They're already measured out in place. I'm gonna mark them with a pencil so I can easily pop them back in. And I can adjust the outer beams with the angled bars or angled supports. As I'm putting it in, I may have to push it left or right a little bit just to make it work. I'll go ahead and assemble it. I've got some Power Pro premium wood screws. These are 3-inch long. All right, so I've got everything screwed together. My next step is I'm going to put my extra pieces of wood over there on the inside here so I can screw the top piece to the bottom piece. That way I can secure them together. I'm not going to do this inside the garage because I got to carry this and it's going to be extremely heavy. So I'm gonna take the top piece off. I'm just gonna put the bottom piece in there, so I've got a piece screwed into the bottom, and then the tab will be at the top, so I can just slide this over top of it when I get it outside. Now, one other thing to take note of, if you're not doing this with a table saw on a planer, all lumber is not created equal. It can be a quarter, an eighth inch off, either wider, thinner, thicker, depending on the plane it came from. So your wood may not turn out perfect unless you do this on a table saw and you actually make every single cut. So some of these places I've got like a small gap down here, and this board was like 1/16 of an inch thinner than the other boards. So basically you just have to kind of work around it. Again, unless you're going to put this on a planer, or unless you're going to put it, you know, through a table saw. But for what I'm building out here, it'll be perfectly fine. Another thing you can do if you want, you can take a sander and you can smooth these edges out. I've got like a little bit of overlap. Again, the board's just got like it's not been planed, so it's tight at the bottom, tight at the top, and a little gap in the middle. So you can take a file and rasp that out if you want to, but since I'm covering this up on the outside, it's not going to matter anyhow. If this was a finished product, I might do that, but since I'm covering it up, it's not going to matter. This is just the foundation for what we're going to put on top of it. So I've got my deck boards here. I need to make a lot of 7 1/4 inch cuts to cover this, because I'm going to do an up and down planking. So what it is, I made a jig on my little tiny saw here, and again, I'm just doing this with a little 7 1/4 inch compound miter saw. Don't need anything bigger than this for a small job like this. I'll probably eventually buy something bigger one day when I get lucky. If you want to mail me one, I'll send you the address. But what I've done is I've kind of made a jig. So I cut a piece that's 7 1/4 inches long. Since it doesn't hang off the end, I can't really build a jig up on my table. So I just took the board holder that comes with the saw, tightened it in place, slid my 7 1/4 inch piece here, so my blade hits it. So all I have to do is take my boards, slide them in until I hit the stop, chop it, slide it, chop it, slide it, chop it. And that'll save me from having to measure out a whole bunch of wood. In the video I was watching, the contractor had put these together. Basically, when he laid his planks down, he laid the planks down out here. He'd had all these attached to the back already. So when he cut this piece, it just fit in there nice and perfectly. I'm not that good of a carpenter, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and cut these a little shorter. I'll put my bottom deck on first. I'm going to take that and I'm going to overlap it like so. So I cut this down to the point I put a piece of my 7 1/2 inch right here, and I measured this up till I got this exact measurement right here. So basically what I've done is I've made another piece, and then as I go down with the decking, this is just going to sit on top of it, and to me it's going to give it a more finished look. I don't know whether it'll affect it structurally. Someone will probably let me know in the comments. I'm sure with the water going back in, someone will tell me it's going to do something. It's pressure treated wood, so I can't imagine the water's going to do anything to it. But either way, again, I'm not that skilled of a carpenter. I don't have a table saw, so if I'm off an 1/8 or a 1/4 of an inch down there, I'm going to have to try to rip a piece with a skill saw. It's going to turn out really bad. So I'm going to overlay it and forget about it. So to figure out my step decking on the top, what I want to end up with is an angled edge, so I can do like a pie shape in the corners just to make it look a little bit better. I want my overhang about a 1/2 inch on the front. So what I'm doing is I put the two boards together here. I'm going to measure the gap between my two planks in the back, and then I'm going to have to rip one of these down the middle. Well, it won't even be down the middle. I'll probably rip about 3 inches off the edge of one. And again, this goes back to where if you've got a table saw, you can put the planks on the outside, make that fit nice and neat. Since I'm ripping this with a hand saw, the odds of me getting from one end to the other perfect are not very good for me. So I'm going to cut the piece down to whatever length I need, probably 42, 44 inches, a little bit longer. Rip the edge off and then cut my 22-degree back cuts on it. So I've got the piece ripped down to where I want it. It was about 2 inches wide. I'm going to line up my left-hand side here to my 45, my 22.5, and I'll pencil mark right at the edge. So I'm going to cut this off at a 22 that direction. Now that I've got that cut, that should line up perfectly, which it does. So I can cut my next piece same way. I'm just going to line up the edges. I'll go ahead and cut a 22 on the next piece, line it up, mark it, and keep on going. Now again, this is a project I'm working on. So as you can see, I've got no support underneath it right here. So I'm going to take a couple little blocks and add a little support right here between here and here, so I can actually secure this so I don't have a floppy piece in the middle. I don't want to just screw it here and here. Even though this piece is going to be overlapped this way, and no one's probably going to step on this part, I still want to put a couple little bars. Might do them on the outside here, just so I can have something to screw this into at least once. So there's my next piece, which I'm ecstatic with. So I'm going to do one more for the outside edge. Same thing, overlap. Cut my first 22, lay it down, measure, cut. So there's my top step. Again, I'll probably do some reinforcements under the sides, but this will give you the basic layout. Again, if you're a carpenter by trade or just a little more expert as me, you can make some corrections before you do this part, and you won't have to make as many little fixes. But for the most part, I think it's getting there. So what I want to do now is rip another 2-inch board. I'm going to go ahead and do my 2 inside 45s and my 2 outside edges with those, and then just repeat the process until I get all the way around it. So there's my bottom step all cut out. Again, nothing screwed together yet, it's just cut out. I've got my next step, the ledge is done in the front, so I got all my pieces cut. So I'm ready to do my top decking now. Now what I did over here on this side, I'm off like a 1/4 of an inch. So I'm going to have to find a way to fix that. Again, I'm not a carpenter. I never claimed to be a carpenter. Just do this on the side. So I'll try to figure out in the calculations what I did wrong, and I'll change my math. So when I do the diagram, you shouldn't come up a 1/4 or 1/2 inch short over here. So I've got my bottom step all cut out. I haven't screwed it down yet. I put a couple supports in where it needed so I could screw it in. I've got my second step front planks cut. So I'm ready to put my top step on. This is just to give you an idea of what to do. Double check all your measurements and stuff before you cut them. But either way, I'll show you how I fix that problem once I get ready to tackle it. So there's my finished result. Everything's screwed down. It's solid as can be. It's definitely much better than that piece of plastic right there. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. There's a lot of little problems here and there with it. Again, you've heard me say this a dozen times during the video. I'm not a carpenter. Don't claim to be a carpenter. But considering what I did, I'm quite happy with it. A couple little corners here. I'll just take a little oscillator tool and round that off a little bit. Take a sander to it. That's the pattern I went with on the top of it. If you wanted to, you could make the wider wedge versus a little pie wedge. Again, I got this diagram from somebody else online, just kind of modified it to make it fit my hot tub. That little pie there, I don't know if I like that as well as I like the bigger pie, but again, this just gives you an idea of what you can do and how it can be better than what you had to start with.